I will now introduce you to Stuart Agnew, who will open the actual debate. Thank you.
Right, good evening. Thanks very much. Now, just over 45 years ago, we signed something called the Treaty of Rome. 2 or 3 years later, we had a referendum on that Treaty of Rome, and we thought that we had joined a customs union, a trading relationship. And that's what we thought we had joined. We then signed 5 further treaties over the ensuing years, each of which should have had a referendum on them because of what they implied, which was loss of your democracy. We have now ended up in a situation where we have thrown our borders wide open to 480 million people. We have allowed foreign bureaucrats to initiate 75% of our laws, and we chuck £50 million every day of your money down a bottomless pit. We did not vote for that in the referendum of 1975, but that is where we are now. However, there are many people who feel that this is a good place to be, and they use basically 3 scare tactics to try and persuade you that this is where this is our future. And they are what I call PIT, an acronym: peace, influence and trade. The argument is that the European Union has produced all the peace in Europe since World War II. We wouldn't have had it without the European Union. I would say that that's incorrect. Peace in Europe has been because of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, which says that an attack on one member of it is considered as an attack on all of them, and nobody is going to take on the United States. And I would suggest that had there been a NATO 102 years ago, there might not have been a First or Second World War. Nevertheless, we're told that it's the EU that's kept the peace, but in fact the EU has started 2 wars in Europe. One in Croatia and one in Ukraine. I'll go into details with questions, but that is what has happened. So it's nothing to do with peace. What about influence? Well, we're told, well, we've got a seat on the table. You know, we can influence things over there. Well, we're one country in 28. That is all. And the way the democracy is rigged there, we don't get our fair share. For example, 5.5 million people in the eastern region, 7 MEPs. 800,000 people in Cyprus, 6 MEPs. And that distortion is continued across all the smaller countries in Europe. It's a pretty bad deal. Now, it doesn't stop there, of course. There's something called the Council of Ministers. And that is increasingly being dominated by Eurozone countries. And every now and again, another country joins the Eurozone. We have now lost the ability to form a blocking minority against the Eurozone. The Eurozone is proceeding as one country, one fiscal policy. So there's not much point now in turning up to a Council of Ministers. So that's the sum total of our influence. What about trade? We're told, oh, this business of 3 million jobs. Leave the European Union, we're going to lose 3 million jobs, because they say, oh, our exports to the European Union need 3 million people to produce them, etc. Well, there are 4 million people in the European Union who depend on their jobs to export to us, because we are their biggest single customer. This is absolute scaremongering. It simply isn't true. And in any case, it's a purely academic statement, because an independent Britain would be a member of the WTO. The European Union is a member of the WTO. The rules of the WTO are you cannot raise tariffs and non-tariff barriers against another member. So that is a completely hollow argument. The European Union are the only people who negotiate trading relations with third countries on our behalf. And they've been doing that with South America with a deal called Mercosur, which I think is going to badly hurt farmers. They've also been doing it with a deal with the United States called TTIP, Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership. I've had 14,500 emails from people objecting to TTIP, many of them from people of the left of the political spectrum who would normally be rather in favour of the European Union. What they're concerned about is that TTIP is going to undermine the ability of our National Health Service to fund its inputs, etc. Now, they produced an agricultural chapter on TTIP. Because I am on the Agriculture Committee in the European Union, I was told I could go to the reading room in Brussels and read all about it. When I turned up there, I was told I had to sign a non-disclosure statement. I mustn't say a word of what I'd read. I had to get rid of my mobile phone. They checked me for a microphone and a camera and hell knows what. I was even not allowed to take paper in there like that. I was given a bit of paper that couldn't be photocopied. So, yes, the Commission can say, well, Stuart Agnew MEP, he's seen it, he knows all about it, but if I can't tell you about it, what on earth is the point of it? So, that's how it works. Now, what about on the ground? People in this region, how is it affecting them? I think particularly of the small businessmen. the SME, small and medium enterprise, who the European Union says they plug and push all the time, but they don't. And I'm going to give you a few examples. When that gets to there, I've finished, have I?
Yes.
Right, all right. Several examples. Let's kick off with the firm in Harlow in Essex, who made weighing machines for people who couldn't stand on either. They were a chair. And on the side of that chair was a box of tricks, and there was a digital readout, which told you how heavy you were. Pretty straightforward. Well, this firm in Harlow were doing really well. And a big firm in Germany called Siemens didn't like this upstart firm in Harlow, undercutting them with these weighing machines. So they went to the Commission and said, oh, this is not good enough. We've got to really upgrade these weighing machines. That box of tricks on the side there should be able to withstand the force of an industrial magnet. I'm sure we all agree there's loads of industrial magnets in residential homes about the county, aren't there? Well, of course, they couldn't. The cost of doing that to that box of tricks meant that they just couldn't be competitive, and so jobs were lost and they've discontinued that line. Then we had a lady in Ipswich who invented, found, discovered a recipe for fish bait. And by goodness, the anglers were after her. She got it right. They were all winning their competitions. She went from just her kitchen to employing 7 people on an industrial unit near Ipswich. Her recipe was terrific. Then the EU come along and say, you have now got to register what you're doing, and it's all got to comply with the EU Feedstuffs Directive, a tome about that thick. And you've got to disclose what's in all these ingredients, about 40 odd of them. A huge complication for no good reason at all. Then we have a firm here in King's Lynn who made protective clothing, and in doing that, in that process, they have to add a very toxic chemical which they then remove. It creates some sort of an action. HSE crawled all over that firm. They were doing it well. They were disposing of the chemical, well, recycling it all the time. Nothing wrong with what they were doing. EU come along and say, that chemical's under Schedule 14, you've got to do this, that and the other, you must tell all your customers you're using Schedule 14, so they've got to store what they buy from you in a different place, they've got to tell their customers this is such a toxic thing, and you've got to employ somebody full-time to research ways of not using something in Schedule 14. Meanwhile, in Brazil, they happily tip Schedule 14 all over the place for their protective clothing and sell it here, and not a word is mentioned. Right, I'll just do a quick one more. Here in Dereham, Russell Scientific Instruments made barometers. The EU tell Edward Allen, the proprietor, you can't put mercury in your barometers, it makes them dangerous. And he says, all right, well, I'll sell them in Canada. No, you can't sell them there either. I mean, it's just ludicrous. Well, I'm going to finish, Chairman, on a bit of a tricky subject, tampons. About 1/3 of the population of this country buy tampons and other female sanitary wear. The EU say these are a luxury good, 5% VAT levied on them. We would say they're not a luxury good, they're a necessity. I'm sure everyone would agree with me. While we're in the European Union, we can do absolutely nothing about it. So 1/3 of 1% of all the VAT is raised, it goes to Brussels. So ladies, you're really helping this project along. Thank you very much.